everyone, welcome back to my channel. Did you know you have to make your habits attractive in order for you to do them? What does that even mean? A lot of our actions are driven by the dopamine release in our brain. I'll explain a little bit more in a moment. But before I go on, today we're going to be going over chapter 8 of this great book at Atomic Habits. And it is now going to be talking about the second law of behavior. So if you've been following along in the first couple of videos, we went over the first law, which is make it obvious, your cues. If you haven't seen those, they are on my channel. You're welcome to go ahead and take a look. So the second law, what it's going to be talking about is how to make it attractive. So make your habit into a craving. So what does that even mean, right? Like, how do you make your habit a craving? I was confused when I first read that too. So the book gives an example of a scientist who's doing some tests on rats. And on the first test, what he did was, I'm a nerd, I write notes about everything. On the first group of rats, the researcher blocked the release of dopamine. And then what ended up happening is the rats lost all will to live. They didn't crave anything within a few days, and the animals died of thirst. So they were deprived of dopamine. It's your happy chemical that your body releases when you do something like exercise or something that's going to make you happy. So these rats were deprived of dopamine, and they literally just rather die. So there was a second group of rats. These rats had dopamine blocked, but were provided with sugar water. Rats looked happy. They still enjoyed it, but they didn't want it anymore. The ability to experience pleasure remained, but without dopamine, desire died. And without desire, the action stopped. And as you can imagine, these rats also died. So they would still experience pleasure with this water, but they didn't want it anymore. They didn't really care for it if they weren't getting the dopamine. So what the scientists did is they reversed the study. So researchers flooded the rats with dopamine when they performed actions wanted. The results were that rats did the task at record speed when the system was flushed with dopamine. So when they were provided with dopamine, that's when they were really on it and trying to get things done so they can get the dopamine fix. So us as humans, we're very similar. We start getting these happy chemicals given to us when we do actions, then our body is going to be more likely to want to do it. So a lot of people think that dopamine is just for pleasure. Dopamine isn't only for pleasure. It plays a role in motivation, learning, and memory, punishment, and aversion, and voluntary movement. So it's not just the happy chemical that everyone thinks about. So dopamine is released not only when you experience pleasure, but when you anticipate it. So examples of this could be, a gambler gets a dopamine spike prior to placing a bet, not when they win. So them, just the anticipation of possibly winning, they get a dopamine fix. Or a gambler who goes and buys a lottery ticket gets a dopamine spike. Or they also gave examples of cocaine addicts. So the cocaine addict gets dopamine spike when they see the powder, not when they actually take it. So what they found is the anticipation gives you more dopamine spikes than the actual action you are anticipating. So when you predict that an opportunity will be rewarding, your dopamine levels spike in anticipation. Anticipation of an experience can often feel better than attaining it. So what are some examples of that? So let's say you planned a vacation and you spend your time daydreaming about the vacation. Then when you're actually there, you don't enjoy it as much. That happens a lot. Or let's say a child, when you were little and you were going to go to like Knott's or a field trip when you were with your class. And the night before you couldn't sleep, you got up early that morning, you showered, got ready, got all cute, and then you're ready to go to the field trip. Then when you're actually at the field trip, it wasn't as fun. It was a lot more fun getting ready to go. And you experience this with different things, first day at school, first day at work, all these new things give you this dopamine spike. So those were some examples that the book provided. And desire is the engine that drives our behavior. Every action is taken because of the anticipation that precedes it. It is the craving that leads to the response. How do I make reading attractive? So I can give you guys some examples. I used to read, but I didn't read as much, or I wasn't as consistent. I would have my little phases. So I wanted to be able to be an avid reader and just be consistent with it. So when I read this book, it said make it attractive. So what is it that I like a lot is school supplies. My siblings literally buy me school supplies on Christmas at times. And I like these little tabs. I use these tabs on my files when at the law firm when we had physical files. After the pandemic, we did everything electronic, so I don't have these physical files anymore. But I always enjoyed these little tabbies. So what I decided to do is I tabbed each chapter for my book. And the other thing that I did to make it more attractive is I highlighted it with pretty colors I like. I got myself some matte highlighters. So what it does is it makes my book pretty. It makes me want to go touch it. And then when I put these cute little highlighters, it motivates me to read the book in detail and highlight the important parts. And then the second thing I do is I go ahead and notate the information I learned. So I'll put it right here. And you guys can see I'm still using little tabs for this. And I just pretty much use colorful pens, the pens that I really like. So I go ahead and write it all down, the information I learned, so I can always go back to my notes. And then I make my YouTube video. So I organize myself like that so I can retain the information a lot better and for me to be able to share it with you guys in a lot easier way, because sometimes when you try to remember everything, it's really hard. So I pretty much made reading attractive to me, and it's also a calming time for me. So I do it after the gym at nighttime before I go to sleep. I read for about 2 hours or so. So making things attractive will really help you be consistent with those actions and to create them into habits. In the next coming chapters, it'll give us a little bit more details of how that is. But the summary at the end of the book, I really like it. It gives you really good key points. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you guys. So it says the start of the second law of behavior change is make it attractive, which we talked about. The more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to become a habit forming. Habits are a dopamine-driven feedback loop. When dopamine rises, so does our motivation to act. It is the anticipation of a reward, not the fulfillment of it, that gets us to take action. The greater the anticipation, the greater the dopamine spike. Temptation building is one way to make your habits more attractive. The strategy is to pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do. So it gave us that information. And I think that making something attractive will make it a craving, and then the cravings give you motivation. Let me know if you guys are creating things to look pretty or attractive in order for you to do them. I know it's kind of hard, like how do you make exercise attractive? You can put on some cute little outfits. Another example that they gave here, because it says to correlate whatever behavior you want to do with something you like. So there was this guy who really enjoyed watching Netflix, but he knew he had to exercise for his health. So what he did was he built this bike, and then it had the movie on there, the Netflix show. But if he was at a certain speed, then the show would turn off, the TV would turn off. So he had to be at a certain speed in order for him to go ahead and binge Netflix guilt-free. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's a little bit extreme, not something we can usually do. I think he specialized in some kind of software thing that he was able to do that, but I thought that was pretty interesting. He just basically said, hey, I could still binge Netflix and exercise at the same time, and if I'm not going fast enough, then my show will turn off and it'll motivate me to go faster so I can keep watching the show. So I thought some of those examples were pretty cool. I also thought that it was really interesting that the rats would rather die if they don't have dopamine being released. I don't know what would happen with humans. It provided other examples too, that we kind of like binge on food before our ancestors wouldn't have all this food available to us. They would go do hunting and gathering, and they would try to eat as much food as they possibly could because they didn't know when their next meal was. And that's just how our nature has been for many years until recently. Now that we have McDonald's, Taco Bell, all these other things, all these foods are accessible to us, but we end up overeating because that's how we were in the past. That's how our ancestors were. So they think that's kind of embedded in us. So we need to try to not binge. Anything you do that's too much can always be bad. Too much food. Even if you do too much exercise, you can hurt yourself at the gym. everything in moderation. And our bodies are not used to that anymore because they were used to overeating. So now people tend to overeat because it's just so easily available. It's everywhere. They make the food look delicious, so they make it look attractive. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I hope this helped you guys and you guys are enjoying this series. I will be talking about chapter 9 in the next video to see what other ways we can make this attractive. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this information, please consider subscribing. This is my thing to turn off my camera and it gets stuck. So let's hope it works. Jesus.